Okay. All right, everybody. How you doing? It's Keith, and welcome to whatever this is going to be for the next hour or so. Um, I'm sitting here with my good friend, author, speaker, teacher, I don't know, dad, lawnmower, um, all kinds of things. He does it all. He's the total package. My friend Herb Montgomery.
Thanks, Keith. It's good to be here. It's good to see you again. It's been a long time since we've talked.
It really has. I apologize for that. I guess we've both just been really, really busy.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the blame is mutually shared.
Yes, I'll do that. I'll take that. I'll take my half. Awesome. So, man, yeah, it has been such a long time. Honestly, I just personally wanted to catch up and see what you're doing. And I know you and I have some topics that are dear to our heart. I'm sure we will have an opportunity to talk about. But yeah, let's just kind of what's been going on with you? What have you been doing lately, and what's on your heart?
Well, most of our events this year have been canceled at Renewed
Yeah.
Heart Ministries. So we're leaning into our online presence. We were doing about 3 podcasts a month up until this, and now we're just doing them every week. And, we have a Zoom heart group. Heart group's what we call our small group, mutual participatory sessions where it's not me going on and talking as much as it is everybody sharing. We do that on Wednesday night through a church in Southern California. They have a Zoom set up where there's a few folks there that go through the weekly podcast or the weekly article, whether they want to read it or whether they want to listen to the podcast. And then we get together and just discuss it for about an hour on Wednesday night. So that's been fun. That's new. So it's a transition time. I mean, COVID's got everybody transitioning, and we're just doing our best. Here locally, we have a few elderly people in our circle of friends and community and family that we spend a day each week doing all their grocery shopping for them so that they don't have to leave home. We are fortunate to be we live in a rural section of Appalachia, and so we don't have the numbers that more heavily populated areas have. We're fortunate in that, but even with small numbers, we see our numbers going up, and we've even spiked this weekend with the reopening of everything here in West Virginia. So, well, not reopening of everything, but the soft reopen. So we're leaning into that and just being open to how we can support the most vulnerable, the least of these. And I don't mean least in the sense of value, because they're just as, they have just as much immeasurable worth as anyone else, but they're more vulnerable in this time. And so we're doing that on the ground here locally and helping out where we can, coming alongside organizations that are doing a lot more than we have the capacity to do, and adding our help. But we're adjusting. We're adjusting as a ministry. Family's doing well. Everybody's home. I have 3 children, and our eldest was in college, and so my kids, I love them all to death, but they have 5 years between them, each one of them. And so they're like 3 only children. You throw all 5 of us in the same house. I was an only child.
Yes,
And
you
well,
do.
kind of. I grew up an only child, even though I have other siblings from other marriages. But I grew up the majority of my years as an only child. And now I have 3 only children. And my wife thinks we're all crazy because she grew up with, multiple siblings, and she doesn't understand how we all interact with each other. But it's
Yeah.
funny. We've quarantined different aspects. We have a very small house, but we've quarantined different aspects of the house. So when somebody needs to get away, yeah, everybody just goes to their corners and, don't bother. We have these, the noise canceling headphones, not the expensive Bose kind, the like $10 ones you
Right.
put on when you're chainsawing,
Right.
or they use at the rifle range, whatever.
Yeah.
Those kinds. Everyone puts their noise canceling headphones on in the corner of the room, and we're all in our own space. And yeah, it's funny, but we're all surviving. We're all doing well, and we're still trying to practice the mutual aid and the resource sharing that we think is life-giving.
Yeah.
So those are our values we're trying to live out. And, doing ministry right now is challenging because of the dynamics. So we're trying to navigate those as well as possible.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Good to hear all that. Yeah, that's the one thing. Honestly, as you were talking, it's like that's the one thing. Wendy and I just moved to El Paso in October, so we're kind of new here. We've only met a few people, and so the part of it, we're used to doing that kind of stuff. In the past, we did that in California, we did that in Idaho. Since we've been to El Paso, we haven't really been able to connect with either directly with people that we know who are
Mhm.
financially, in need or in trouble or anything like that. And we haven't partnered with any like local food banks or
Well,
organizations or
you're
anything like.
new. I mean, you're just getting there.
Yeah. So, but I feel bad about that. I feel like, gosh, man, we should be doing something. I'm taking care of my parents. My mom and dad, they live. That's why we moved here. So, and my dad's on oxygen and all that. So we've been trying to help them. Like I went over there yesterday and climbed up on their roof to try to fix their evaporative cooler.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I did fix it because it wasn't broken.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
they said, yeah, can you come over here and check it out? So I get in my car, I drive. It's only like 15 minutes away. Get over there. I climb up on the roof, take the thing off. You have to take it apart. Pull the root thing up, the lid off, and I'm looking inside, and I'm pulling. I go, well, turn it on, and it works. And I go, well, I said, what was not what? Why did you think it was broken? And they said, well, we couldn't hear the pump running because there's a water pump that pumps water into these pads. And
Oh,
then I realized it's because my parents listened to the television at 100 volume, and they're deaf, so that's why they can't
so it
hear the
was
pump.
their hearing apparatuses that were
Yeah, that's
failed.
what was
So,
broken. And I'm like,
see, you're a better human being than me. I'd have walked down off that roof, looked at my parents square in the eye, and said, "All fixed. Got it running for you."
yeah, oh man, no charge. Yeah, yeah, boy, no, that was crazy. But anyway, um, so yeah, man, I think you are somebody that I mean, just I love about our friendship that I really appreciate is you've always been someone who has helped me to process things, and in some ways, on certain things, you're kind of farther ahead of me down the road, and you've helped to kind of pull me along or maybe push me a little bit. And one of those things was because I think when we met, I was kind of not sure where I was at with the whole affirming LGBTQ
Yes.
people. And it was a genuine struggle. I mean, I really was. Wendy and I would take walks. Like we'd walk like 2 miles around our block like every day, and during those walks we would talk. And it was funny because we would kind of talk about that was at the time that was kind of on our minds. And I'd read all these books about it, and I tried to go look at scriptures about it and stuff. And anyway, you sent me a book, which I think we talked about since, and I think you've changed your mind on it. But at the time, we thought it was a great book.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was I mean, it's a great book in that for me, it's the book that did it.
It moved you down the path.
It really did. And
It did me too.
who was it? Brownlee? Was it Brownson?
Brownstone. Brownson.
Yeah. Do you remember the title?
Bible, Gender, and Sexuality, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I always forget what the 1, 2, 3. Um, but
It's still a heterosexist approach,
yeah,
but it makes a lot of room for people of varying gender identities and sexual orientations within evangelical, or not even. I don't think he's an evangelical. He's more of a progressive mainline Christian, but it just makes a lot of room for them within that. It takes people where they're at and it moves them again down the path towards more open inclusivity. I don't think it's where we need to land, but
right.
it's an in process book, and
Yeah,
it's good for what it is.
yeah. Well, and that's exactly what it was for me. And I think what it did for me, because again, I probably read like 6 books on this topic, pro and con, up to that point, and none of them ever convinced me. I was just still like, I don't know. And I think what his book did, well, the background of the story is he's like a Bible scholar, seminary professor, or something like that. He was like already a guy writing books
He's a
on.
Reformed Calvinist. I mean, he's
Yeah,
and for all the issues that I have with Reformed Calvinism,
and there are many.
yes, 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 yes. But the thing is that they're, even though they look at the information differently than I do, they're not intellectually lazy. And so
No,
when you come to that book, it's not easy reading. It is information heavy. And
yes,
so it's it's been a book that I've thrown at a lot of people, and the negative pushback that I've always gotten is not that I disagree with his points. It's that I can't get past the first chapter because I'm not used to reading this kind of material.
Right. Yeah.
It's information. It's heavy. It's academic.
Yeah. Yeah. But see, I think that's what I needed at the time. That's one of the things, because my sticking point was the scriptures, what I thought the scriptures were saying. Right. Well, it says right there in my English Bible, homosexual.
Right.
And and well, I can't get over that. And so it was excellent, because man, he just went in, like you said, a deep dive on the Greek, on the culture, on the background of this verse, and what's being communicated and not communicated here. And man, I mean, by the end of that
I
book,
still think his stuff on Romans 1 is the best stuff out there.
yeah, really
I
good.
mean, Romans 1 is the hang up for most folks, most Christians that are non-affirming. And
Yeah.
his dissection of Romans 1 is phenomenal.
And I got to say, to me, the Romans passage is, I think, one of the easiest ones.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because I mean, I've done this. I have encouraged people who are really honestly wrestling, not just trying to argue, but if you honestly are wrestling with it, they'll just read Romans and follow his train of thought.
Yeah.
It's the entire chapter is not about homosexuality.
Right.
It's about pagan idol worship.
Sure.
That's the entire conversation. And it just so happens that
then we have to come along behind that and do damage control for all our pagan friends.
Yeah, yes. I'm like, yeah, how many people do you know who are gay because they started worshiping, Pan or
Sure.
Aphrodite or something? Like, no,
Sure.
it's ridiculous. But
Sure.
here's one of the things that I try to point out to people, like in the Romans passage too. So he points out that in these pagan practices, they engage in same-sex, ritual, whatever. I said, now what if in this particular pagan worship practice, it was heterosexual sex that he was describing? Would you assume, therefore, God hates heterosexual sex? No, you wouldn't. Why? Because you're
culturally programmed to accept heterosexual sex.
Yes, you would get it. You would go, oh, well, obviously he's not critical of the type of sex going on. He's critical of the fact that sex is being used in these profane ways to worship this false god. And that is what he's saying. That's all he's saying. Anyway, it's definitely but once I turned the corner, that book really did help me. And once I turned the corner on it, so after I read that, and I was sort of like convinced now, because he kind of loosened those knots for me on the scriptural side. Like, oh, I understand now what's being said and not said. Then I started.
And it's pretty hard if you've been raised in a fundamentalist evangelical context. It's pretty hard to get those knots to untie. I mean, they're pretty tightly pulled.
Yeah. And you know what I honestly realized as I was processing through it, so once that was removed for me, once that obstacle was removed for me, I did that. I like what you're saying. I started thinking, well, why was this so hard? Or why is this so hard? I think, you know what? I think honestly, and I think there's a lot of Christians that this is what it is. If you're heterosexual, you've been raised, this is all you've known. This is what you call normal. The idea of something that you don't understand is just strange to you. Like you just, oh, that's weird. Well, that's because that's not you, right? So you can't imagine, why would anyone want to do that? Well, you don't, because that's not who you are, right?
Yeah.
So I really had to get down to realize, like, no, it's really just, I think it boils down to me not understanding something, or I can't relate to something. And so therefore, it has to be wrong, right? It has to be bad.
Well,
but
humanity has survived a long time by responding negatively and violently to anything that's different.
Right.
And we're at a place where we need to grow beyond that.
Yes.
And I think this is pushing us in that direction. It's
Yeah,
one of the things that's pushing.
I agree. And one of the things that gives me hope is when I see that there seems to be a movement of Christians who are moving away from um, violence, moving away from uh, nationalism, moving towards affirming people, no matter who they are. Those things give me hope because to me, I feel like I can perceive the kingdom advancing. I can perceive some progress and movement here away from some very unchristlike ways of thinking and being into more. I mean, I wish it was faster, and
Sure.
I wish it was bigger. And maybe I just can't see the whole thing, but what I can see, when I can see that kind of thing, it gives me hope. So
It is really hard for Christians, and I can only speak about Christians because that's the context that I was raised in. I don't know if it's harder in other persuasions or other faith traditions, but I know it is extremely hard for Christians to imagine a world that's different than themselves and a world that's much larger than just what they've experienced.
yeah.
And that takes time. I mean, it's a slow process.
So I got to talk about this because I want to give you, excuse me, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you've been doing. Because the other beautiful thing, and to be honest, so that book kind of helped remove that block for me. But what
Mhm.
really, really did the trick for me was when I started. So I wrote a few blog posts where I was going to kind of try and it's kind of weird to say, but kind of come out and say that, hey, I'm going to affirm this. I think this is not a sin and all that. So I sent a couple of these out to some people I respected, not expecting they were going to agree with my conclusion, but just I wanted them to think, look at my thought processes, and am I making sense and whatever. And I had so many people come back to me, and I'm not kidding. I probably sent it to 10 people, and I probably had at least 5 of them come back to me and say, "Wow, Keith, this is really great. Can we have coffee?" And sure. And so we meet in person, and then they tell me, I've been gay my whole life, or I've struggled with my gender identity, since I was a little kid. And I was like, I had no idea.
Wow.
So it was sort of like, by the way, Keith, you have gay Christian friends, you just don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was exactly different context,
Yes.
but the way that was baptized into all of this was someone coming to me saying, you have gay friends that you don't know are gay and or bisexual or lesbian
Trans.
friends.
Yeah.
You have these people of various sexual orientations that you don't know. They are already listening to you and they think of what they said was they think you're affirming, you just don't know it yet.
Yes.
And the reality is I had just not, my theology where I was at that time, I had not reasoned it through to its furthest logical conclusion. And it was these people in my life whom I didn't know were different than me who actually pushed me. And I appreciate them for having the courage to come to me and just saying, listen, I mean, that's huge for someone who's not out, that's in the closet, that to come to someone who is at that time I was in a religious leadership position within the context that I was living in, for them to have the courage to do that and to risk, all of that for themselves. My hat's off to them. I'm a better human being because of my LGBT
Yes.
friends.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And the same thing happened to me. And again, it was God's timing. It was just kind of funny. It was sort of like when I was ready for it, I had all of a sudden these people coming to me and I had a dear friend of mine. I worked with her for I worked with her about 3 years, but I'd known her for about 10 years. Um, and she had contacted Wendy and I about starting a house church, and she wanted to meet for breakfast. I'm like, okay. So Wendy and I meet her in the morning, Saturday morning for breakfast. And she goes, well, the reason why I want to start a house church is I've been kicked out of every church up where I live.
Hmm.
She lived like 2 hours away from us, and because I'm gay, and I have a lot of other friends who are also gay who have also been kicked out of all the churches up around this area. They kind of basically outed, like from the pulpit, finger pointing right at them, and horrible stories. And they were just looking around, going, well, we can't go to church anymore, but we'd like to. Why don't we just start one? Because my friend Keith does this house church thing. Maybe we should start one. So that was the reason why she wanted to talk to us about starting a house church. And so it was right about that same time when she looked across the table and was tears in her eyes, tells us, her story. And then I just started meeting more and more people like that. I met a few people online like that. I found out there was someone in our house church, right? And so it was like that. Wow.
Right there in your already existing house church that you've
Yep.
been fellowshipping with for months and you didn't
Yep.
even know.
Yeah. And so then this is the amazing thing. And I want you to, I know you've had stories, but the beautiful thing that I saw Christ in those gay Christians, because they, with tears in their eyes, would tell me stories about family members rejecting them, friends rejecting them, church rejecting them, and then with a pure heart say, "But I love them and I forgive them." I'm like, whoa, right? Supposedly you're the abomination, you're the sinner in this equation,
You're
and yet
more like Jesus.
yeah, you're the one being more like Jesus in this. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I will say that both Christian and non-Christian, I think human beings are human beings,
Yeah,
regardless of their orientation. I mean,
yes,
there are beautiful human beings and there are nasty human beings, and it has
yes,
nothing to do with their orientation.
right.
But I will say that over my journey over the last decade, some of the most beautiful human beings that I've encountered have been LGBT folks.
Hmm.
They're just incredible human beings.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
My life has been so enriched.
Hmm. Yeah. So so I've taken a little bit of a hit for some of that. I mean, I definitely have some people. In fact, even just recently, has resurfaced who, you know, called me a heretic and a false teacher for affirming homosexuality and all that. And um, so, I mean, I knew I would, and I made a decision that I would. In fact, I would. That was the final thing before I published any of those articles. Was like, when you know we're talking about it again, and I said, I know I'm gonna. I mean, I always take heat when I make a stand on something like that or anything. But I thought, I bet this one's going to be probably one of the hardest ones. But um, I said, my job is to tell the truth, and it's not to protect myself, right? But if my choice is, I can just keep my mouth shut and I can protect myself, or I can
Mm.
take a stand and do what I can to protect people that are friends of mine or even people I don't know. By publishing something and saying something and trying to move the needle in this direction, hopefully I'm protecting people that are in danger because of this ignorance, right, surrounding this
Harm
issue.
reduction.
Sorry.
Harm reduction.
Yeah, exactly. And but so I know you have too. I know you've done way more than I've done, and you've probably taken much bigger a
Well,
hit.
I don't know about measuring it like that. You know, it did about bankrupt us as a ministry. We
Yeah,
about lost the ministry over it, and we're
over
still not back to
over
where we
that
used to be.
issue, that particular
Over
issue.
that issue.
Yeah.
Over that issue. Um, we just lost. We lost almost our entire board
Mm,
of directors.
mm,
We lost a ton of donors. Uh, and we still aren't back to where we used to be, um, but we're surviving and we're still doing ministry. And
yeah.
Ched Myers um, wrote a book called "Say to This Mountain," and it's about overcoming what seems to be insurmountable injustice in our society. And he talks about the beginning of the Gospel of Mark. It's a commentary on the Gospel of Mark. And he talks about how John the Baptist didn't show up in the story as the son of a priest, even though he was. He should have gone into the priesthood.
Yes.
But he shows up in the story on the margins of society in the wilderness. And then it talks about Jesus showing up in the story in the margins of Galilee, not in the central, Jerusalem center of that temple state. And just how the gospel is already at work on the margins,
Mm,
and the questions for those that are privileged and centered even within the church is not whether they'll allow LGBT people to sit at their table, but whether they'll come alongside and support the gospel work that's already taking place on the margins of their churches, of their communities, of their society, where God is already showing up and doing beautiful things. And so, yes, we are nowhere near where we used to be taking the hit for this. But I would say we're doing more quality, tangible ministry on the margins than we ever were doing before. So in
Yeah.
one sense, I mean, if you look at it from a capitalist sense, we're doing horribly. But if you look at it from a ministry sense, we have never been a healthier, more life-giving ministry
Mm.
than where we are from the journey we've taken over the last decade. And I look forward to what the next decade is going to bring to us.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be challenges, but from a ministry aspect, we've never done genuine ministry like we're doing now.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, I'm gonna embarrass you a little bit, Herb, because I gotta
Sure.
say, when I talk to people about you, if I tell someone about Herb Montgomery, I always say that I think you're one of the bravest people I know, and what I love about you so much is your courage, because well, even when we first met, I think when we first met, it was really more over the issue, the shared interest in sort of a home-based, everyone sharing kind of ecclesia model, and that was, I think,
I love egalitarian faith communities.
yeah. That's what brought us together. And but you have this speaking ministry in these denominational churches, and they
Used to.
are well. Well, this is part of the story. Yeah, you. So the way your livelihood is, right? Hey, guys, we're gonna pay the money. We're gonna bring this Herb Montgomery guy out. We're gonna put him up, in the hotel. We're gonna feed him. We're gonna pay him. He's gonna come and speak for 3 days or a part of a conference with a bunch of other people. And hey, everybody, Herb Montgomery. And then you started getting up because this was on your heart, and just sort of teaching about, hey, this seems to be God's heart was for everybody to be together, for not to be a single leader, and like all this kind of stuff, and sort of undermining the system that brought you there. But you've done that consistently. You've also gone into places like that, and when it's not going to be well received, and taught a message about nonviolence, about enemy love, or many other, or this issue of loving and affirming people who are gay or trans or what have you, and so I love that about you, because I know that every time you get up and do that, you're standing up there teaching these things and saying these things. There's the potential that, yes, somebody out there is going to listen to what you say and have a change of heart, but it's also almost guaranteed you're going to get an invitation to never return.
Yeah, they're going to have a change of heart for sure. And
Yeah.
maybe what I've gone through has made me a little cynical about it. I don't know if that's healthy or not. I haven't visited that yet. But they're going to have a change of heart. They're either going to have a change of heart about the way they think, or they're going to have a change of heart about me.
Right.
And too often, the majority of the responses have been, Herb's dangerous, and Herb's not what we thought he was, and Herb's changed, and
Yeah.
and I have changed.
Yes.
I mean, that's a true statement. So, I mean, they're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to just tell, we don't have to name names, but the last time I saw you face to face, you were in Southern California speaking at a church.
Yeah.
And, and I think, was it a Saturday night or something, or Sunday night? I remember anyway. And you were like texting me. We had already arranged that I was going to pick you up and we are going to go get coffee. So I'm driving around and I got lost. I couldn't find the church. So I turned around. I was coming back. It must have been that building I passed. So as I'm coming up to it, actually, no, I found it, and I'm in the parking lot. And so I'm waiting for you.
It became not coffee. It became a rescue mission.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sitting in the car and you're texting me and you go, start the car. I'm like, what? So I'd already gotten out of the car and I was walking, because I saw you walk out and people were talking to you. And then you come walking right at me really fast. And I'm all like, gonna give you a hug. Hey. And you're like, and you just keep walking to the car. Let's go. Start the car. I'm like, what? And people are coming behind you. There's a crowd coming. And we get in the car, start the car, and I'm like, what's going on? And you're like, these people are going to kill me. And I was like,
probably not literally.
Well, but
upset.
It felt like that. Like, these people are pissed and they want to eat you alive.
Yeah, and it was over the most asinine stuff. I mean, but one thing that I've learned is that there are people that feel very strongly about their theological interpretations, and if you challenge that, and I know, well, yeah, I try. Anyway, this was one of those moments where people had a violent response to the teachings of nonviolence.
Nonviolence. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and yeah. So I appreciate you being there for me that night.
I saved your life, didn't I, Herb?
Yeah, I was kind of, the reality is that it was a week-long convention. And in the beginning of the week, I was spending time out there, with everybody hanging out. But towards the end of the week, it had just become too much. And everybody has their own limits as to what they can endure. And so I wasn't spending time out and about with the audience. I was, doing my presentation, getting the negative feedback in the Q&A, and then just going to my room, and just hanging out by myself. So what happened is I was out there on the curb waiting for you to show up, and that gave them the opportunity, yeah, exactly. It was like, it was like a bunch of fish where, you throw food in the pond, and all of a sudden, there's Herb, let's get him. And I was like, show up, Keith. I can't wait much longer. So yeah,
That was I mean, we're laughing now, but it was really painful at the time, and it's disappointing. Man, especially this nonviolence thing, it drives me batty, man. I don't get it, And I put together like this meme, and it came out of frustration. It really did. And actually, it almost is literally a comment. I just took this comment that I wrote in a Facebook conversation and just dropped it into an image. But it was like, going back and forth. It's like, why are Christians the hardest people to convince that Jesus taught nonviolence and enemy love? Like, so I was like, okay, I was in this conversation with this guy, and he just kept coming back. Well, what about going by a sword? What about making that whip and beating them people up in the temple? Like, the whole things. What about I didn't come to bring peace, but
it's
a sword?
only 7 arguments that are ever brought up, and none of them are original. It's just repeated.
And exactly. I've done this so long, I already know everything you're gonna say, right? So I was just like, okay, man, okay, you're right. Let me just get this straight. You've helped me to see the light. So this guy who was prophesied as the Prince of Peace in Isaiah, who was going to come, and everyone that followed him was going to beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more. His birth is announced by a legion of angels just proclaiming peace on earth, goodwill towards men. He's born. He starts his ministry by telling everybody to love their enemy, turn the cheek, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. He rebuked his disciples when they wanted to call down fire, saying, don't know what spirit you're of. He disarmed Peter and said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. He told Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world, but if it were, my disciples would fight. As they're nailing him to the cross, he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And when he rises from the dead, he breathes upon his disciples peace. Yeah, that guy, he's so violent. He's so pro-violence. Like, I just don't get it.
The Jesus of the story, there's no way to make that Jesus violent.
No.
There's no way.
No.
Even Gandhi, it's purported that he said, everybody knows Jesus was nonviolent except the Christians.
Yes. And if he didn't, he should have, because he's right. No, and one of the things I found, right, there's actually a verse in Isaiah that, speaking of the Messiah, says, though he did no violence. It actually says the phrase. It's in the passage where it talks about how he made his grave with the sinners, whatever.
The suffering servant, sure.
Yeah, the suffering servant passage, and it actually says of the Messiah that he did no violence. And so usually what I'll say in those passages is, well, if he did anything violent, he's disqualified. He wasn't the Messiah, because according to that, he wasn't violent.
What do they say to that?
Usually, they don't have a good response.
Well, because that audience is pretty invested in Jesus. Yeah, right. Fulfilling that interpretation. Sure.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's one of these things where I just realized that I'm just always going to have to do this. Like, this is part of my life's mission, is to have this conversation for the rest of my life. I'm always, always going to be trying to help Christians see this when they don't see it. And it
Yeah,
isn't.
there was a time where I thought it was only going to be temporary,
Me too.
because I thought it was generational, and I'm not trying to be, I just thought I would outlive the arguments,
Yes.
like at some point. But I am growing more and more concerned that younger and younger Christians are imbibing this toxic form of Christian teaching that we're going to be those old crotchety guys that are heretics,
Yes.
that the younger generation writes about how awful we were. And I remember reading about those guys when I was in my 20s. These guys, you should have seen them in their day. They were heretics. That's what's going to happen.
Right.
It's
But
just going to be always with us, at
yes.
least in our lifetime.
Well, but you know what? I mean, and part of what underscores that you're right about that is like when I read Dostoevsky, The Kingdom of God is Within You. And here's a book written almost 100 years ago. And,
Yeah, yeah.
and he got it. Oh my gosh, did he get it? And the arguments are awesome. And I'm like,
And here we are.
yeah. And you're thinking, why didn't this do it? This should have been the final statement. Everybody, go read this book, and let's all agree we got it. Okay, move on. Nope. And then you got Walter Wink and like all these guys like that have been saying this kind of stuff for a long time, and it just nope.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it does nothing, but it just there is no decisive, like you said. It's sort of like there's an embedded. It almost is like a power structure. I mean, I was talking to Wendy yesterday about this, like, because unfortunately, those voices, the voices that are anti-gay, pro-violence, they kind of almost want a theocracy kind of a system, like all of that kind of stuff, all that kind of teaching. The real problem is that those guys own the publishing houses, they own the Christian television stations, they own the Christian radio networks. In other words, they've got the power as far as the voice and the communication. They own they control the seminaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you have all that, right, like that thing is chugging along, spitting it out all day long, 24/7. There's that message, and then and the kind of stuff that you and I are talking about. It's like we're over here doing a podcast, and I wrote a book, and it's
Right.
like, hello,
Yeah.
it's like
Voices in the wilderness.
yes, exactly. So I guess that's part of the reason why the best we can do is just sort of maintain this sort of equilibrium of like, but wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, for me, and this might be a cop out, and it may be what I've experienced over the last few years, that but at the end of the day, even if we don't accomplish anything, I want to go out at the end being able to rest my head saying I'm proud of the kind of values and ethics that at least I helped promote within the human race. If
absolutely.
that's all I've got, that would be enough for me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Like you're exactly right. When I think about that too, it's like, and it sounds morbid. I hope this is a long way off, but when I think about, my funeral, yeah, I hope genuinely when I'm gone that people can say, wow, this guy really believed that God was better than we thought he was. This guy really loved people regardless of who they were. You know what I mean? Like that he and it was willing to say it even if it didn't change the world, even if it didn't, you know, um, seem to make a dent. It was like BBs on the battleship.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, um, that's really what matters. What matters is that we have a clear conscience, that we're saying what we believe is really true, and yeah, that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah. And at the end of the day too, and this is maybe morbid and disheartening, but Keith, you're not dead yet.
I know.
All of the authors that I get benefit from are all dead.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going to read you until you're not here anymore.
Well, yeah. Maybe I should fake my own death.
But it's amazing how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time we lose somebody, there's a spike in whatever their creative work was.
But you know what? I mean, and you know this. um, that is true as far as like, yes, all of a sudden everybody wants a copy of whatever they wrote. And yes, they love quoting these people, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr.
But it's pretty
But
easy to co-opt them.
but yes, what they do is they just kind of like, so their message is like this, and when they're dead, it becomes spread out, but it also becomes like this, right?
Yeah.
Just soften that curve a little bit, and we pick the
MLK is
quotes
a
we
great
like.
example of that.
Yeah, yeah. We're like most of the people that quote Martin Luther King Jr. are gonna ignore the quotes that are like anti-Vietnam War, even anti-American capitalism.
Anti-capitalism, yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, they'll just pretend that didn't happen.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
that's the way it goes. Well, man, so you're staying busy. Are you working on a book at all? Or have you thought about writing another book?
We were about to start a crowdfunding source, funding for to print a new manuscript that I have.
Really?
Yes, we're self-publishing through Renewed Heart Ministries, and we were about to do that when COVID-19 happened.
Oh,
And
bummer.
so we put the brakes on all that and said we need to spend our energy not on fundraising, but on helping people that need help right now.
Yeah.
But in doing that, we've received all the funding that we need to print it.
Oh,
We've
praise
had some
God.
donors step up just out of the, in the background and say, we're going to underwrite the book and all the publishing costs and the editing costs. So we're working on book cover design right now, and the final editing is being done. And I've got a quote from the press, and it should be coming out. I'm hoping it comes out in 2020. It's just the mechanics. It's written, and it's just the mechanics of getting a book through the publishing process during a pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Well, tell me about it. I'm trying to do the same thing. So tell me about your book. What's it about?
well, it's the title is Finding Jesus. It's going to be a sequel to the last book that I wrote, which was Finding the Father. And I wish I didn't get to choose that title. I wish it was a different title. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But this is going to be a follow-up to take people that enjoyed that book, to bring them from where I was when I wrote that book, at least give them a journey, kind of a progress, bringing them to where we are today. It's called Finding Jesus, and the subtitle is An Evangelical Preacher Discovers the Social, Economic, and Political Teachings of the Gospels.
Wow. Wow.
So it's not going to be as heavy theologically as the first book was. It's going to be more ethics, more values, more practical, rubber meets
Practice.
the road. How do you live out
Yes.
the values that we find in the Jesus story? There's a couple chapters on confronting torture and eternal punishment, which is a big mainstay in evangelical Christianity still. I don't understand how that's holding on, but it is.
Yeah.
There's some chapters on nonviolence. There's some chapters on the economic teachings of the Gospels and how that was lived out in the story in the book of Acts, how that was portrayed. And there's some other surprises in the book too that I'll just keep as a surprise. Stuff
Good.
that I have not gone public with, that's in the
Wow.
book. So you'll
Wow.
have to read the book to find out those things. But there's a couple chapters on affirming theology in there as well. It basically is bringing people from where we were when the first book was written to where I am today.
Yeah.
And all those topics that were such great prophet, creators for the ministry when I preach them, they're all in this book that I'm sure will do well.
Oh boy.
So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I know there's a group out there that will read it and that it'll appeal to. But it's basically my story after encountering theologies that were that come from a different social location than mine. Womanist theology, liberation theology, Black liberation theology, Latin liberation theology, queer theology. All of these theologies, having been exposed to those in the pushback that those theologies give to the theology that I was raised in and that I thought was universal. I hope it'll be a blessing to people. I hope it'll
Oh,
be a benefit to them.
Well, no doubt. I can't wait to read it. And then when it comes out, after I've read it, I'd love to interview you again about the book and
That'd be great. That'd be great.
definitely help you promote that. And actually, you mentioned something there. Like you were one of the first people to mention to me some of these books from the sort of the Black theology angle,
Hmm.
um, like the Cross and the Lynching Tree, and what's the other one? Something.
You're talking about James Cone's work?
Yeah, but then there was also one by a Black woman. What was it?
Oh, that was Sisters in the Wilderness by Dolores Williams.
Yeah. No, there's another one. It's something like something woman Black Christ. What was it?
Oh, that's by Jacqueline Grant.
Yeah,
White woman's Christ, black woman's Jesus.
something.
Oh.
Yeah,
White women's Christ, black women's Jesus by Jacqueline Grant.
yeah. Wow, dude. See, again, this is what I'm talking about. Like you exposing me to some things, some ideas that I would never even have thought about.
That's a fantastic book. If someone hasn't read it, it's worth your read.
So, what are some of the? I mean, can you quickly give us some like what are some of the things that when you were reading those that new perspective, right? Sort of opening yourself up to like something outside of your bubble, outside of your sphere, um, reading those kinds of books. What did that help you see that you couldn't see before?
Well, one of the biggest things that it impacted, well, first of all, it called me on my white privilege and a lot of the ways that I assume the world operates that it doesn't. And it helped me see, even within nonviolence and some of these areas that I've grown in, to help me see where those have done damage still to minority communities. How we have to be careful. Nonviolence can be very damaging, especially to communities of color, because too often nonviolence is touted by the people doing violence to them to make them not respond and be passive. So that's one area that I've really been called on the carpet on and had to grow in my understanding of nonviolence. The power of self-determination within minority communities to determine their own response to violence and oppression. Self-defense, is it violence, is it nonviolence? The wrestling with those issues. And what does it mean for people in a social location that's more marginalized than my own, or maybe further down the social pyramid than my own. So it's challenged me on that. But one of the greatest areas that it's pushed me in is my understanding of atonement theology. I spent years, just flopping back and forth between, Christus Victor and moral influence and penal substitution and all of these, trying to make sense out of the death of Jesus on a theological level. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about even Mennonites are kind of marginalized within Christianity, but Mennonite author, why is his name escaping me? Wrote Nonviolent Atonement. Denny Webb. I think that's his name. Anyway, he has a bibliography in that book that lists all of these authors like Dolores Williams and Jacqueline Grant and James Cone and these folks that when I went back and researched, I realized that in my atonement theology, we're all asking the wrong question. The story isn't about Jesus dying. The story is about those things that overcome death. And it's more focused on the resurrection. And Jesus's death was the interruption to his salvific work. And the resurrection in the story is the rebirth of that salvific work that lives on through us, through Jesus's followers, and practicing those same things that Jesus taught. So it's been, it's called me on my racism. It's called me on my heterosexism. It's called me on my sexism. The patriarchy, all that stuff has been challenged. That stuff was so baked into, and it still is baked into, not just the way you view the world, but also your theology and the way you read the Gospels, and to hear or to listen, to stop and just listen to the voices of others who do theology from a different social location than your own is truly eye-opening. And it's challenging. Sometimes it's painful.
Mm-hmm.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
But it's a healthy process. I think that all white male straight theologians need to stop and listen to non-European, non-Western American theologies.
Not
And
non-male.
yeah, it would be life-giving for them, be healthy for them.
Yeah, I think you may have been the one that sent me this book too, or at least suggested it. There's a book called something like Patriarchy.
Oh yeah,
And
old classic.
what's it?
Christianity, Patriarchy, and Abuse.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Because when you said painful, that book was painful. That was
yeah.
a difficult book to read. Um,
A feminist work. It's really a
yeah,
feminist critique of Christianity.
yeah. Well, I think it was that book. That book is the one that kind of exposed. It was either that book or Jesus as a Feminist, but one of those two books. For sure, I think they both probably touched on it. But
I didn't
that was
read Jesus as a feminist. I've not read that.
okay. Anyway,
Yep.
but anyway, so maybe it was the patriarchy book. But as someone who was really into the early church and their value for the poor and their nonviolence and the way they gathered in this sort of non-hierarchical way where everybody's practicing one another's. So I've always, in my deconstruction process, I really looked up to people like Tertullian and Irenaeus and Origen for those topics because they
Right.
are great on those topics. But then I'm reading this book and she's quoting those guys
And they
talking
were
about,
horrible on gender issues.
oh my gosh, I'm reading
They
this
were
and just,
products of their time.
I
They were
know,
as patriarchy as the day is long.
yes, but I had no idea. I had no idea. And so I'm reading this for the first time and I'm just going, oh, come on, really? You gotta be kidding me. Oh my gosh, it was just horrible.
Yeah.
So that was
That's a
like,
healthy process to go through, Keith. That's a good pain.
oh, I know it is. I know it is. Just to have that sort of like, oh, they weren't the greatest Christians who ever lived. No.
This is
They,
why I always love talking to you. Is you have an incredible openness to listening
yeah,
and I'm not saying listening to me, but listening to these other voices. It's just a rare thing to find in another Christian, uh, especially a white straight Christian male, to
yeah,
find just an openness to say, you're right. I
yeah,
need to consider this. That's huge.
yeah.
So
Even
I
if
appreciate
yeah,
that about you, Keith, very much.
thanks, man. Well, I appreciate, like I said about you, that you've been a catalyst for me, and I think you've helped to prod me and push me in some of these directions, even. And I guess the reason why I have that attitude is like I just recognize that I've been wrong before,
Right.
and I'm probably wrong about some things now,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'll be wrong again.
In the
So
future.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. The goal is not to find the right interpretation. The goal is to find the most life-giving interpretation. And when
yeah,
we discover that present interpretations are not as life-giving as we thought they were, we can make those interpretations give way
yeah,
to better interpretations. And down the road, we may find out those interpretations weren't as life. We can do it again.
yes.
The point is to be in progress, be in
Hmm.
motion, be growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. The point is to be in progress. Yeah, that's what I try and encourage people to like. I've been coaching some people through this deconstruction process. Um, and that's one of the things in fact, that's one of the first things I think I uh, point out to them is that, so when you deconstruct your faith, right? So usually it starts with one thing, right? It's either like, oh, the Bible isn't infallible, or oh, hell is not eternal, or oh, God isn't going to torture people for eternity, or whatever. Um,
It's the thread on a sweater.
right. So whatever you have this first thing, you sort of like deconstruct it. Oh, you have this idea. You look at it. You question it. You realize, oh crap, I was wrong. And now you have a new idea about that thing. But we if we're not careful, right, we become just as dogmatic about now this new thing. No, this is right. I'm going to show everybody how they're wrong about that, and I'm right about this. And it's still, the focus is still on I'm right and you're not, which is what your problem was over here. So you have to not only deconstruct the theology, but I think what I've been trying to encourage people to understand, or to at least consider is that one of the things we need to deconstruct is the idea that we need to be right.
Yes.
Right? We have to deconstruct our need to be right. We need to embrace the mystery. We need to recognize we don't know everything, certainly not about God. That we think right now I believe, but I don't know, right? It's like going back and embracing what we just said, that whole the in process part of our faith. That's what faith should be, I think, is that, so like you shouldn't let the cement dry. Because again,
Right.
part of recognizing this deconstruction process of your faith is painful, is that it's this, you got a sledgehammer and you're breaking chunks of concrete, right? And that's violent and
It's stuff
painful.
that you've gotten value in life from in the past, and now you're threatening those things.
Yes, yes.
That's
So
emotional.
right, because oh, there you go. Well, see, it's because you put yourself, like you act like you are your beliefs, but they're not. You are over here, and then you have some beliefs over there. You're not, you've immersed yourself in your belief, and it's who I am. Like,
Man, I don't want to tell you what it was, especially since we're recording this is going to go live. But there was something I mean, there was one thing that changed in my theology at one point that I am not exaggerating. I spent 5 days incapacitated on the couch, not able to do anything, unmotivated, just grieving the loss of
mhm,
that belief.
yeah,
And it can be very an emotional. It's not theology is not always just intellectual and objective. It actually never is.
no,
There's a lot of emotions and subjectivity involved in it. And the deconstruction process can be very painful. And I like the idea of you leaving the cement wet. I
yes,
love that, because our focus as Christians for too long, certain sectors of Christianity, has been right versus wrong. And
yep,
I think what that needs to be deconstructed, like you say, to whether what I'm doing is life-giving or whether it's harmful. What am I
yep,
believing? What's the fruit of what I'm believing? Is it life-giving or is it harmful? And to the degree that it's harmful, it needs to shift. It needs to change.
yes. And whether it's harmful to others or to me, and it can
Mhm.
be, sometimes it can just be, this isn't good for me. Like this is
Yeah.
harmful.
I want to, yes, let me qualify that, because who it's harmful to or what it's harmful to matters.
Yeah.
Is it harmful to a person's status as privileged, elite, and powerful? Well, then you're probably in the right story. If it's harmful to people who are on the margins or the oppressed or people that are excluded, people that are on the undersides of society or disenfranchised, if it's harmful to them, you're not in the right story and something needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really true. And that's a good point. Because sometimes the questioning and the pain we go through, it's not comfortable, but in the end it's good. Like it's good to let that thing die. It's good to
Yeah.
let that disillusionment happen to you, to let it go, because the end, now once you let that go, you can receive something that is better, that is
Right.
life-giving, right?
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, we've already talked now for about an hour. I appreciate your time, my friend. I miss you.
I miss you too, man. It's always good to talk to you. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, same here, man. One of these days when we can get back on airplanes and fly again, it would be great to get together. If you're ever in El Paso, let me know.
Absolutely. And if you're ever in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, Appalachia,
You know
you're
what?
welcome.
I
My
might
home's yours all the time.
I might be actually. Hold on. I was talking to a guy. I don't know when it's going to happen or if it'll happen, but I think he was in West Virginia. Let me see. Sorry, I'm doing this in real time. Yeah, West Virginia. There's a Grace Life Church in. I didn't write down the name of the town,
Hmm.
but it actually is in West Virginia in October. So I mean, I don't know if that where we're going to
The
be.
furthest place in West Virginia that you could go from me is 5 hours away. That is way closer than Texas.
That's true.
So if you land in this state or anywhere near me within driving distance, come stay with us. We'd love to have you.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, Wendy and I would love to do that.
Yes, but add a couple days to your trip and come hang out with us.
Yeah, man, sounds good. Well, I love you, man. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll stay in touch. And I definitely want to know when your book is out. Let me know, dude. I'm gonna be out there championing it. In fact, if I can give you an endorsement quote, I'd happy to do that.
I'll send you a manuscript. Thanks so much, Keith. I love you too, man. Give my love to Wendy, and yeah, let's do better at staying in touch.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. Love you, man. Take care.
Love you too. All right, bye.
Bye bye.